Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news coming out of the college football landscape as the Clemson Tigers joining Florida State in suing the ACC. And from what you've been reading with these reports coming out within the last hour, Florida State has been the team in the spotlight, really pursuing options outside of the ACC. But it sounds like the Clemson Tigers have been exploring their options a little bit more quietly over the last couple of months. Now, news comes out today that they are also joining Florida State, suing the ACC. I want to talk about the future of this ACC conference. I want to talk about the future of this Clemson Tigers program. Before we get into it, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. And it truly has been a wild last couple of months talking about conference realignment, talking about the potential possibilities of what conferences look like over the next couple of years. Cannot thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, would love to hear some feedback in the comment section, whether you're talking about the future of the ACC, the future of this Clemson program, or any legal experts that want to give some context to what we're talking about. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into this one now. I want to start with why Clemson and Florida State are going in this direction. And it's been pretty clear. The last 2 decades, these are the 2 premier programs in the ACC. You start looking at some of the numbers. I'm just going to read you guys the ACC champions from the last almost 2 decades, dating back to 2011. It's Clemson, it's Florida State, it's Florida State, it's Clemson, 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 Pitt, Clemson, Florida State. Now, it has been no secret who the premier programs are in the ACC. And more importantly, you take a look back at that 2023 year, you take a look at the most viewed games from ACC matchups outside of the ACC championship game. Florida State and Clemson, that game was by far the most watched game, 6.7 million people tuning in. The next closest game in the ACC that did not include Florida State and Clemson wasn't even over 4 million. So you take a look at the kind of leverage, I guess you'd say, Clemson and Florida State have in terms of the eyeballs, in terms of the attraction that they command. It is, by far some of the highest in the ACC. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see some of those other top programs in the ACC join Clemson and Florida State, right? The Miami Hurricanes, certainly one. I think Virginia Tech is kind of a sneaky program that has and commands a lot of respect in eyeballs as well. I think in my mind, this gets us into the second conversation, and that is, what does this mean for the ACC? And I think we take a second and envision, what does the ACC look like? And I'm a Wake Forest guy. That's where I went to school. I'm a Wake Forest football fan. What does the ACC look like without Clemson, Florida State, potentially the Miami Hurricanes? It's not a Power 5 conference, right? And I think you're already starting to see the Big Ten and the SEC emerge as those top kind of Power 2 conferences. Without Clemson and Florida State, that was really the only 2 programs that were keeping the ACC relevant in the college football landscape. Without those 2 programs, I think that this ACC it's not a Power 5 conference, and I don't even know if the ACC has much of a future with what we just saw with the Pac-12. I think you could see a very similar situation where Clemson and Florida State decide to leave this conference. I think it's a domino effect. The Miami Hurricanes, Virginia Tech, some of those other premier programs in the ACC. I think you could throw in North Carolina as well, probably following suit. And so I think Clemson joining Florida State, I think, continues this chain of dominoes that we've been seeing. And you look 3 to 4 years down the road, and again, as a Wake Forest fan, I'm not going to get up here and tell you guys that Wake Forest is running the ACC, because it's not. And if Wake Forest is one of those top programs in the ACC ain't no Power 5 conference. I think we can all agree on that. So the future of the ACC, I think, was already in jeopardy in terms of being a Power 5 conference. But I think with Clemson joining it, I think the writing is on the wall in terms of what that future of the ACC looks like, especially when you see a team like the Miami Hurricanes or Virginia Tech kind of follow suit as well. Now, the next conversation is, where do you kind of start putting these teams in conferences? And again, Clemson, Florida State, I would throw in Miami. Those are teams that they're going to go to Power 5 conferences. The SEC, the Big Ten, they are going to want those programs in their conference. Now, looking at the Clemson Tigers, I think this one makes too much sense. This is an SEC program. I think a lot of people that follow Clemson, it's run like an SEC program. I think that's where it makes the most sense. You obviously have some rivalries with South Carolina to go to, mean, you look at the next 2 to 3 years, I don't think it's crazy to talk about the Clemson Tigers being an SEC program over the next couple of years. And Florida State, I think you could kind of go either way with Florida State, right? I mean, whether the SEC, whether it's the Big Ten, one of those conferences is going to take Florida State. And as a Michigan fan, I would love to have Florida State in the Big Ten. We just took Oregon. We just took Washington, USC, UCLA. I think that you're going to see Clemson, I think largely to kind of tie a bow on this, and I'm going to keep this relatively short because it's changing so quickly. I'm not going to get up here and kind of extrapolate on some of the basic concepts, but you look at what the future of the ACC is, that certainly it kind of seems like the dominoes are starting to fall. And I think the ACC is no longer going to be a Power 5 conference over the next couple of years. Now, how long does this stuff take? We're going to see. But I think the writing's on the wall in terms of the future of the ACC. And when other programs like the Miami Hurricanes, like the Virginia Tech Hokies start seeing that writing on the wall, they're going to follow suit too. These programs want to make sure that they're protecting their own interests as an athletics program. And when they see the ACC going in the wrong direction, they're not going to be sit around on a sinking ship. They're going to look to jump to the Big Ten, look to jump to the SEC as well. We'll probably do some longer formed episodes in terms of what conference realignment could look like in the future. But right now, I think the biggest takeaway we have is the ACC not going in the right direction. I would be surprised if it is. I would be surprised at two things. One, if it's even really a conference in the next 5 years, but definitely not a Power 5 conference if Clemson, Florida State, and again, Miami, Virginia Tech, UNC decide to leave. We'll continue monitoring. I wanted to hop on, give you guys some of my thoughts. Again, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section, whether it's the future of the ACC, where Clemson is going. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.